In today's video, we're going to continue on with our series of videos where we're analyzing all 31 NHL teams, where we complete a season recap and make an off-season plan so that it can improve and be more competitive for next season. Today's feature is focused on the New York Rangers, and that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams. So if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we're examining the New York Rangers. We're going to do a quick recap here on their 2017-18 season and take a look at what should be in their off-season plans to make them a better, more competitive team leading into next year. So obviously the Rangers finished in last place in the Metropolitan Division this year with a 34-39-9 record for 77 points. Obviously, a lot of things were very disappointing. They ended up firing their coach, Alain Vigneault, right at the end of the regular season, and we saw all kinds of veterans get moved out. We saw Captain Ryan McDonough, we saw JT Miller, we saw Rick Nash, we saw Michael Grabner. A lot of these were expiring contracts, but not all of them. So the team's certainly going to look quite a bit different going into next year. And there's certainly more guys that are rumored to be possibly traded during the offseason as well. And we'll get into some of those moves here that we may see happen here momentarily. But the Rangers certainly went through some tough times this year. They got off to a really slow start. They picked it up, played some really good hockey for a while, and then slowly kind of fell back down. And then the team kind of decided at the management level that this wasn't working and that they kind of needed to tear things down and go through a rebuild or a retool, whatever you want to call it, and made a letter to fans to make them all aware that they were going to be shipping out a lot of guys, especially on expiring contracts, older players, to try to get the team to be younger, faster, more skilled, and therefore more competitive to keep up with a lot of these other teams that they were having trouble catching up to in the standings. So the Rangers certainly didn't have a great year. There wasn't a whole lot of things that really went well. Certainly as far as things that didn't go well, I mean, obviously like their defense didn't really have the greatest season. Brendan Smith ended up in the minors. He did play pretty well for them leading into the end of the season before and in the playoffs. After they picked him up into the trade deadline, he played pretty well in the playoffs for the Rangers. But coming into this year in a new extension, that contract that he got just did not look good at all. Brendan Smith had a terrible year and said that he finished out the year in the minors. So it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens to him. I'm sure they'd love to move him and get him a fresh start somewhere else, but based on how he played this past year, that's not going to be easy to do. They may have to retain some salary. I'm not sure what they're going to do with that, but it's certainly a player that they probably like off the roster, and a signing they certainly regret getting done for sure. By the end of the year, their defense looked pretty much like an AHL roster. I mean, Kevin Shattenkirk was the big signing last season. He ended up off with the knee surgery and missed a big chunk to end the year as well. So you take away Smith, you take away Shattenkirk, they trade McDonough. So they had a lot of inexperienced younger defensemen back there. Brady Shea is one of the few bright spots on the Rangers blue line. Shattenkirk will hopefully bounce back from his knee surgery and be back to his normal self next year as well. So they do have a few bright spots back there on the blue line, but we get to see some guys like D'Angelo and Pionk get some more playing time and to see what they have there as well. I mean, obviously they still have veteran Mark Stahl as well. So will be interesting to see how they try to retool this blue line next year. I mean, obviously Shea and Shattenkirk are the two main pieces there. But beyond that, will they want to continue on with Mark Stahl? Obviously he's still under contract for a while. So, could they look at doing something like a buyout or a trade with a retained salary like they did with other veteran defensemen like Dan Girardi? They ended up buying him out. So it could, could we see something like that? I certainly think it's possible. I don't know. I mean, a lot of these guys just didn't have fantastic years between Stahl and Smith. Probably wouldn't be terrible if they could move on from those guys, but like I said, it's easier said than done. So hopefully they can bring in some younger, faster defensemen to kind of offset what they have on the aging side of things there with those guys. It's going to be easy to do. I mean, there's plenty of defensemen that are going to potentially be free agents that they could target, but they certainly need some upgrades back there on the blue line. Like I said, the bright spot back there for sure, long-term at least, is Brady Shea. He looks like he's going to be a tremendous long-term talent for this team. So they should be excited for that. Shattenkirk should be good for a few years, hopefully a good power play specialist. So they have a couple of good solid D-man. They got some other guys that have a good look for next year, so we'll see where they go, but they could certainly use some more help back there in the blue line for sure. I mean, up front, obviously things look quite a bit different. Like I said, they traded Rick Nash. They traded JT Miller. They traded Michael Grabner. So those guys are going off the roster. David Desharnais is a free agent, and he's not going to be returning. That's been confirmed. He's going to play, I believe, it was either in the KHL or one of the European leagues. I can't remember which league he was going to, but he did agree to terms with one of the teams overseas. So he's definitely not coming back as well. Otherwise, for contract expiring that they have Cody McLeod and Paul Carey as well. So I'm not sure if those guys will be returning. If they do, they'll be low budget contracts that kind of fill out the bottom 6 roster, but they may not return as well. A lot of interesting RFA contract players that need new deals that will be interesting to see how they handle. I mean, that's Vladimir Nemestikov, Kevin Hayes, Ryan Spooner, as well as Jimmy Vesey. So up front, they got a lot of decisions to make there. I mean, obviously Kevin Hayes is arguably they're one of their top centers. Between Mika Zibanejad and Hayes are 1-2 in the center depth. So unless they bring in somebody else, I can certainly see Hayes getting re-signed, but they would certainly need to replace him. They don't have a lot of depth at center right now, so I think it's more likely that they do work out a good deal with Hayes to continue on here, but it is possible that they might go a different route, but I wouldn't think so. It is doubtful if Spooner returns. Hard to say. They may let him turn to a UFA and leave, or they may try to offer him maybe a 1-year deal on a small cap hit. I mean, he did play pretty good with the Rangers down the stretch after they cut him from Boston in the Nash deal, but you know, I'm not really sure he fits there long term. Nemestikov, now I think he's a pretty solid player for them. Obviously, he was the centerpiece coming back from Tampa in the McDonough deal, so obviously that's key that they retain him. He could be a good offensive player for them going down in the next few years, so they're definitely going to want to get a deal done with Nemestikov. I fully expect something to be completed there for sure. So Hayes and Nemestikov for sure. Vesey, I'm not so sure. I mean, I don't think Vesey's really lived up to the hype, to be honest. I mean, he could be a bottom 6 guy for them, but I mean, really, they could look elsewhere. They may try to, although I can't imagine they would just not qualify him and let him walk. The more likely scenario is that he might be involved in a trade with maybe package up with some other players, depending on what else they want to do. So I'm not 100% that VC comes back, but either way, he does need a new contract. It'll be interesting to see how they handle that. I'm sure they're not going to want to give him away for nothing, for sure. So for forwards that they have under contract for next year already, obviously we have Mika Zibanejad, got 4 more years at 5.35. You have Chris Kreider, 2 more years at 4.6. Zuccarello's heading into the final year of his deal of 4.5, and he's been subject to a lot of trade speculation. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he is moved. I mean, he's not an old player, but he's certainly not a young player either. He's kind of getting just beyond the prime years, so wouldn't be a shocker to see Zuccarello be moved. It's been speculated for quite some time, and with a 1 year left on his contract at $4.5 million, if he can have a bounce back season and perform a little bit better than next year, really a lot of teams might get a bargain deal out of a trade with Zuccarello. So I mean, he has proven in the past that he can be a very solid player, so I would not be surprised to see him move for sure. But if they don't, you know, he may turn out to be a trade deadline deal this coming year, depending on how things go with the Rangers in the next coming season. Obviously, Pavel Buchnevich has 1 more year left at $925K off his entry-level deal, as well as Jesper Fast at $1.85 million with 2 more years left for him. So obviously some of these guys can prove to be top 6, some of them can be bottom 6, so there's going to be a lot of holes in their roster that they need to fill. They do have some very intriguing prospects that should look pretty solid and fill in some holes and hopefully provide lots of offense for them. Obviously, Swedish star Elias Anderson is a big one for sure. He should step into the Ranger lineup next year. You got Filipino as well. He looks to be pretty solid. He had some time in the American Hockey League this year and did get a little bit of NHL action under his belt. So I fully suspect those 2 youngsters will be in the lineup and be mainstays. Hopefully they can give them some top 6 minutes where they can really produce the offense and see what they are able to do. They've been heavily speculated to be looking at a couple of free agents, and that's really the big part we wanted to discuss here. There's been highly speculated about Ilya Kovalchuk. I know there seems to be a mixed reaction of fans. Obviously, like, it doesn't really go with the whole we're going to get younger, faster, more skilled. Obviously, Kovalchuk does have skill. He can provide offense, but he's not young by any means. I would imagine he's probably looking for a 2-year deal, maybe 3. I don't know if it'll be too long. I don't think any team would probably give him more than 2, in my opinion. At least I don't think they should. But it certainly would be interesting to see about Ilya Kovalchuk. And then there's always a possibility, they've been speculated that they might bring back Rick Nash and Michael Grabner, which kind of doesn't really go exactly with their plan either. But they traded these guys at the deadline. They get some decent assets in return. The Rangers are now loaded with draft picks for the 2018 draft. So, I mean, there's certainly a possibility they could look bring in a veteran or two, either from former guys that they know very well. They could look to Kovalchuk, and I can guarantee they'll throw their name and they'll throw something in the hat here when it comes to talking to John Tavares. Should he make it to free agency, with at this point seems highly likely that he will. He's come this far. I have no doubt that he more likely is going to at least make it to the point where he can speak to teams. Hard to say where he goes, but I'm sure they're interested, and I'm sure they'd love to talk to him. So between all the possibilities for signings, if you look at Tavares, you look at Kovalchuk, maybe bringing back either a Grabner or a Nash. There's some good veteran players there that they could put in the mix. You throw in Anderson and Hedl, and what they have already got up front with Zibanejad and Kreider, Buchnevich. Maybe this team isn't so bad next year. The one area though that concerns me is that all the speculation around guys they're looking at are all forwards, and they really need some help on the back end. So they need to balance that out too. So we'll see how they go. But if they can address their defensive situation, then perhaps they can look at maybe being a lot more competitive for next year. I mean, right now they have $50 million tied to the cap next year under 13 contracts. They don't have a lot of guys under contract. $50 million. We're expected to have around an $80 million cap. That gives $30 million to play with. Mind you, they do need to get a fair bit of guys under contract with that, but also that doesn't count some of these rookie contracts, because that's based on how their roster finished at the end of the regular season. So some of these guys like Anderson, Hedl, whatever, that doesn't count. So obviously they're going to be on entry-level deals. So they'll take up a couple of spots at lower value contracts for sure. So that's going to help still have lots of money available. And as I mentioned, they have some RFAs that are interesting to see if they're going to be re-signed or how they're going to handle all that. But certainly I would fully suspect more than likely Hayes and Nemestikov get picked up for decent deals. And will they move out a Kreider or a Zuccarello or another veteran forward or defenseman, maybe like a Mark Stahl, or find a way to get Brendan Smith off the books as well. So they could even have even more cap space. So they certainly have the flexibility to go spend some money on some free agents. Hopefully they don't go too crazy though and give their kids a chance to play. I think long term that's probably what is best for the organization. So time will tell. So leave me some comments down below and let me know on the New York Rangers next year. Are you optimistic that with the prospects they can inject in their lineup and some of the guys that they're reportedly looking at through free agency, could they bounce back and maybe get through a really quick retool here and maybe be back in the playoffs as early as 1 or 2 years? Or do you really think things are going to go a little bit longer term here, and then maybe they should stay away from the free agents and let the kids play and develop and see how it goes from there? So if you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams. There's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, I hope you consider subscribing. And also give this video a thumbs up if you like the content. I greatly appreciate that as well. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. We'll catch you next time.